by any measure, autism is a subject that is not very well understood across the world, particularly in Kenya and particularly in our society, our African society and our Kenyan society for that matter. Tonight, we are joined by two women, exceptionally insightful women, women who have a stake in the matter, women who have insights on the matter, and one of whom wants to do something absolutely tremendous, all to raise awareness about autism. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you, my two guests tonight. Karibuni sana.
Thank you very much.
To my, is it extreme left? Directly opposite me is, of course, Dr. Kate Oyieke. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
You are a pediatric neurologist and vice chair of the East African Academy for Childhood Disability.
Yes.
You'll tell us a little bit more about what you do in a moment. But close to me is Professor Elizabeth Bukusi, who's an obstetrician and gynecologist, as well as an international researcher, among many, many, many other things. And one very important hat that you wear is that you're a grandmother.
Yes.
And it sounds very important to you.
It's extremely important to me. And I have a grandson who has been diagnosed to be on the autistic spectrum disorder.
Brilliant.
So that's why this is really important for me.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I know you have that's what I meant when I say you have a stake in the matter. You have an axe to grind, a dog in the fight.
I absolutely do.
Brilliant, brilliant. Let's start with you, Dr. Oyieke. Or shall I call you Kate or Dr. Oyieke?
It works well.
Kate, what is it that you do at the association, at the academy? What is it that you people do over there?
So the East African Academy of Childhood Disabilities was started in 2014. And the whole idea was to bring together a group of experts who would be interested in looking after the neurodiverse. So we're not limited to autism spectrum, but that constitutes a large proportion or percentage of the children whose care we're interested in. What about it is the problem? It's the fact that we haven't had a lot of interest, let me say, in looking into the neurodiverse, autism being one of the big categories we have there. And we identified a big gap in the public's understanding, in the availability of infrastructure, in policy, that's available in terms of governance and things like those, in the training that's available in terms of the therapies and the supports, even with the family supports and the social aspects of it. And so we sort of looked into people who would have interest in all those categories and areas, from education involvement to doctors who at that time we didn't have developmental pediatricians. I still was in training. I wasn't in the academy at that point. But out of all that, so much has been done just by the raising of awareness, all right? And for people who are domiciled in all those categories, trying to work independently, but also forming networks. And so we are nested in the International Academy of Childhood Disabilities. And through those kinds of associations, we've learned from how other people did it in other developing countries. We've benefited from the advice of experts who are perhaps more knowledgeable than us at that time in those matters, but also we've taken in our own contexts. And we also incorporate insights from families. So it's an academy in that it brings together many thoughts and many ideas, and so that all those insights, we can grow and expand and learn from them. And our main activities are actually in advocacy, all right? And we want to drive research agendas in the neurodiverse space. So that's really where we come in as far as supporting all these activities.
One of the gaps you've mentioned is information, is knowledge. If we could give you an opportunity, just a few seconds, to break it down to our audience members who perhaps are wondering what you're saying when you say neurodiverse and autism. And they probably heard some of these names, Asperger's syndrome, autism, and whatnot. And maybe those are some of the more popular or well-known. Could you please break it down to us? Talk to us, what does it mean to be neurodiverse?
Maybe because we're limiting our discussions to autism spectrum, I'll talk about that. But I'll introduce neurodiversity as the understanding that being different or wired differently as far as how our brain interacts with our environment, all right, is something that we need to accept as normal, so that we stop labeling, certain ways of being as being, less than. The idea is to foster inclusion, and that's one of the things that then we learned that when we polled, the public, and not just the public, even people in the medical spaces, there still was that misconception of what it is that we're talking about when we speak of autism spectrum. So autism spectrum just means that you have a child who has, and we call it a spectrum 1 because no two children with autism spectrum are the same. So it's a spectrum because there's a lot and there's extreme ends. And so what you need to diagnose a person with autism spectrum is to have difficulties in social communication or social
difficulties
interaction.
in social interaction, social communication.
Language differences, all right? So maybe not the use of language in the communicative sense that everyone else does. So that would be the neurotypical people. What we all understand is what language looks and sounds like to us.
What people are calling normal.
Exactly, normal. So normal makes it sound as though everyone else is not abnormal.
Right.
And that in a sense, is not pro-inclusion because you want to create an other and a separateness that doesn't actually help in terms of integrating. And the third thing that you need is repetitive actions or activities or movements that to some people may seem purposeless, all right? But in actual fact, there may be attempts at interacting with their environments. It's just that we, the neurotypicals, quote unquote, might not actually understand those aspects. And so it's that difference in being that we want to now call the autism spectrum.
All right. And Professor, I want to bring you in here. You've probably in your career have brought to the world or helped to usher in thousands of children. You've been a grandmother for a long time. Thousands of children. One of the things she's talking about is even just how we interact with some of these differences that exist. What have you seen in terms of reaction of parents when they receive a child who's perhaps different?